Well, welcome everybody to the third installment of our grants management seminar. This is obviously one of the requirements for doing a grant this year, and I'm going to share my screen here so you have the nice little picture up there. To start, my name is Kyle Haugen. I'm our District Rotary Foundation team leader up until June 30th of this year. And Margie, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
And I'm Margie Horning, and I'm the District Grants team leader. I'm from Stillwater Sunrise, and I will be starting another year, July 1. So there you go.
Yes. Thanks, Margie. And we'll have a couple other people join us along the way here, which we'll introduce them at that time. A few housekeeping things today. Please keep yourself muted as much as possible, just because of the reduction of distractions, and as well, please turn your cameras on if you don't have them on. That way we know that you're paying attention, since this is a requirement of the Rotary Foundation that we go through a grants management seminar. If you haven't already, go ahead and rename yourself, just so we know who you are and hopefully what club you're from, so we know that. If you have any questions along the way, feel free to message me those questions, and we will either answer them at the time or hold them till the end. And make sure to answer the poll questions along the way, because that's a way we'll make sure you are attentive during the session. And then we'll unmute at the end for further questions if you have any. And if there's any technical issues along the way, Kathy is back from vacation, so send a chat to Kathy Hewitt, our district administrator, and she can help you with those. There are several purposes of the grants management seminars, and I think these are all important. Number one, we want to share the requirements on grants so that you can put together not only an acceptable grant, but the best possible grant. And we want to make the process as easy as possible for you. So we'll be going through some of the grants process to broaden your knowledge base. And lastly, the Rotary Foundation requires a club to be qualified to sponsor a grant. So your participation today will help you qualify your club to sponsor a grant in the 2021-22 Rotary year. This is only for 21-22 though. So if you want to do future grants, you'll need to attend again in future years. So, and there's a few other requirements that we'll talk about as well. So this isn't the only one there. The agenda you can see on the screen there, it looks like a lot, but really we want to hit the high points today. There are, in some parts of the world, the grants management seminars are an all-day, 8-hour-long seminar that they give you every in and out and detail of everything. We don't feel that's a good use of your time, because there's no way you're going to remember everything, and it'll seem more daunting from that perspective. So our goal today is to really cover the high points, tell you what you need to know, answer questions based on what you want to know, and hopefully you walk away understanding a little bit of, okay, here are the most important parts, and here's where I can go for more information after that. And that's really the key to it, because we want to make this as easy as possible for you along the way. So with that being said, we're going to go to our first attendance check, and please enter your name and club into the chat box so we know who's all here today. And as you do that, before we get into the meat of our discussion, I'd like to welcome next year's district governor, my friend and yours from the Greater Mankato Rotary Club, Kenny Klooster. Kenny.
Thank you, Kyle, and greetings to all again. There's lots of familiar faces and lots of familiar names, so thank you all for carving out a little bit of time out of your days to attend. Like Kyle had alluded to, participating in this training is mandatory for Rotary International. But I think you'll all agree with me, an hour and a half Zoom is a small price to pay versus an 8-hour session. So I've sat in on 2 of these already, the previous 2. Lots of good information. Definitely want to thank Kyle, Ed, who will follow in Kyle's shoes, of course, Margie, Kathy, and all of the mentors that are available and at our disposal. So I've learned something from each of the previous 2 sessions, decided to tune in here to the 3rd session. So no pressure, Margie and Kyle, but I expect to learn one more thing today. So Kyle, I'm just going to throw it back to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Kenny.
In mid-bite, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. Just my afternoon snack here. And
That's okay. I figure you and Guy are snacking together, so.
There you go. There you go. All right. Thanks. And what we will do then, we'll move on here. And before we talk about grants specifically, we want to set the stage on the importance of the Rotary Foundation for a few minutes. And here to do that is our incoming District Rotary Foundation team leader, who will take over effective July 1st of 2021. And that's Ed Merrick. Ed.
Thank you, Kyle. It must be a Prior Lake thing that they have a high tea in the afternoon or something and go ahead and snack.
We're hungry. Leave us alone.
If you want to hit up the slides, it'd be way cool.
Just figured everybody could see you in person first.
Oh, I think they would have had enough of that by now. At any rate, when we're thinking about grants and that, let's first start thinking about Rotary's areas of focus. There are now 7 of them: peace building and conflict prevention, disease prevention and treatment, water, sanitation and hygiene, maternal and child health, basic education and literacy, community and economic development, and brand new, what I'm excited about, coming here in July 2021, is the environment. But when you look at all those, it's kind of tough to summarize it because we work in so many different areas, which is one of the things that's always appealed to me about Rotary, is so many different areas you can make a difference in. But when you think of it, Rotary's 7 focus areas all support the concept of positive peace. What is positive peace? Well, basically, it's the fulfillment of all needs in a society. Where sometimes peace can be mistaken as the absence of war or violence, this is a much broader definition that focuses on creating a fair, just, and fulfilled society. When you think of it, when citizens are being supported and all their needs are being met, we eliminate the need for conflict. And when we think about what we do as Rotarians, then really it's creating positive peace. Last year, for example, the New Richmond Club did a grant to build a hand washing station and latrine at a school in a village in Panama. In the developing world, girls stop going to school when they start menstruating because they don't have access to clean and safe facilities. By providing the latrine, girls can continue to go to school and complete their education. That's definitely creating a more peaceful society. Another example, again last year, was the South St. Paul Invergrove Heights Club. They provided vision screening tools to schools in the community so they could better help identify vision issues in students, allowing for solutions to be found for those students so they could achieve success. Again, creating positive peace and improving society as a whole. There are countless other examples of how we create positive peace through our actions as Rotarians, but I think it's important to share our impact. More importantly, realize that the Rotary Foundation is the vehicle that helps us maximize that impact or positive peace that we create in the lives of other people. And giving to the Rotary Foundation is the path. That's the key to making this all happen. Kyle, I'll throw it back to you.
Thanks, Ed. Some of you may already know how the Rotary Foundation works with grants as we utilize the funds that come in to go out to make the world better, but we want to make sure we have a brief illustration to make sure everybody has the same baseline as well. There are essentially 3 main funds to contribute to at the Rotary Foundation. The Endowment Fund on the right, those are typically larger gifts or bequests in someone's will or estate planning. They're held in perpetuity at the Rotary Foundation and the earnings are used to fund other programs. On the left, you have Polio Plus, which obviously goes to support polio eradication. Those are gifts of any size that are made specifically for polio, and those are matched 2-to-1 by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation as well. The one we want to focus on here is the annual fund share program, which are the funds that come back to use for us in these grants. And here's how that works. If you give to the annual fund share program, which we encourage all members to do, and in fact, Nearly 600 members did during our Share the Love campaign in February. But those funds sit at the Rotary Foundation for 3 years and are invested by the foundation. And the earnings off of those investments are used to pay the vast majority of the expenses. So nearly 100% of every dollar that you give to the foundation is put back to doing good throughout the world. After those 3 years, once it's sat in there and invested, it gets split two ways. 50% of it goes to the Rotary Foundation's World Fund, which is controlled by the Foundation's Board of Trustees. And that goes to things like funding peace centers, providing matches to global grants, going to Polio Plus, contributions there. And in the last 15, 16 months, the trustees have moved over $7 million from the World Fund to Rotary's Disaster Response Fund, which is a newer fund developed 3, 4, 5 years ago. And the reason for that was to be able to quickly activate money to go for use in natural disasters. But it's been repurposed over the last year for COVID-related reasons. And in fact, our district got a grant, $25,000 from that disaster response fund last year to help fund COVID-related activities throughout our district. So that's what 50% of it goes towards, is the World Fund. The other 50% comes back to our district for use as district designated funds. We get to control those. And this is what makes the Rotary Foundation very unique, is that we have a say in what those monies are used for through things like grant matches, both district and global grants that you as clubs come up with. And so the money that you give is coming back in 3 years to help fund your projects through those grants. Also global grant scholarships, and we do make a contribution of our DDF to Polio Plus each year as well. So that's in a nutshell how the Rotary Foundation works. And to summarize, the Rotary Foundation is the vehicle that allows us to maximize the impact we have in our communities and around the world through grants. And the more money we have, the bigger impact we can make. So it's important that we just don't focus on spending our funds. We need to encourage members to give as well. And as grant sponsors, make sure you're promoting how the Rotary Foundation is helping your grant be successful, and encourage your members to give to the foundation so we can do more as well. After all, you're not just a sponsor of the grant, but you need to be a champion for the Rotary Foundation as well. Now, I'd like to turn it over to Margie to talk about the 2 types of foundation grants, and that's district and global grants. Margie.
Thank you, Kyle. Well, let's take a look at the 2 types of foundation grants. One is district and one is global. Let's talk about district grants to begin with. District grants are really a tool for Rotary districts to support short-term humanitarian projects that benefit a community. The location can be anywhere. It can be international, or it can be right here in your own backyard. Typically, they're smaller in dollar amounts and smaller in scope than a global grant. They're short-term in nature. Typically, we would like them completed within 12 months of approval, but with the COVID, that sort of played havoc with everybody's timeline. So we can deal with that, so don't worry about it. But usually they are short-term in nature. International partners are encouraged, but they are not required. Okay, so for a district grant, you don't need a host club in, say, if you're working in Kenya. An example of this being an important factor is that occasionally you want to do a grant, but the village where the grant is taking place is so doggone remote that there's no Rotary Club that's anywhere near or reasonably close to the project site to see it as your partner. But because this international partner is not necessary for a district grant, the project can move forward with other helpers on the ground. Now for the match. In our district, we match dollar for dollar up to $3,000 per club. The maximum match on any district grant is $12,000. And so how we would get to that as an example, say we've got a $24,000 grant. If 4 clubs each put in $3,000, we would match, the editorial, we of course, would match $12,000 maximum on that particular grant. but I'll show you some examples about how this works a little bit later. And of course, I would be absolutely remiss if I didn't really hit home on progress and final reports are due to the district, and they're really a critical part of the whole process. So now let's talk a little bit about global grants. Well, as some of you who've done global grants, you can imagine they are a lot more detailed, but don't let that scare you. I'll briefly touch on some of the major points, but as we talked about earlier before the meeting started, we're going to be covering global grants on a more in-depth method in our 2 global grant workshops. The first one is offered this Thursday and the next one is on Tuesday. And those are required for our district if you want to do a global grant or contribute to a global grant in another district of more than $2,500. So at any rate, right now, you know, the location for a global grant must be international. It cannot be local. And the scope, as you can well imagine, is much larger. Right now, the minimum project eligible for a global grant is $30,000 with at least, and this is new this year, $10,715 coming from either District 5960 sponsor or partner clubs or other districts' Rotary clubs. You do need a host club for a global grant, and that would be your international partner in the country where the grant is taking place. And of course, like Ed alluded to, the grant concept must fit into one of RI's 7 areas of focus. Now, there's a document called Areas of Focus Policy Statements that is really a great resource to explore ideas of things you can do, and also maybe to kill a couple that you thought were a pretty good idea, but Rotary International's, not that they're not good ideas, but they just don't fund those items. And there's many other requirements for a global grant. A needs assessment, absolutely critical to begin with. Training plans, measurement plans, sustainability, because a global grant must prove that it's sustainable, just to name a few. District grant funding examples of a single club. Kyle, can you go one? Yeah, there you go. Thank you, Kyle. A single club project. This is just to highlight an idea. So you've got a club and you just want to do the project by yourself. It's got a $10,000 budget. Remember, the district will only match up to $3,000 for that. So your DDF match is $3,000. That means that your club has to come up with an additional 4 or 7 total to get to that project total. Now, if you move over to the other side, if you have multiple clubs in that same $10,000 project, in other words, you let others share the fun of the game. Club A in this example puts in $2,500, which they're the sponsor club, they're the author of the grant. Club B puts in $2,500. The DDF matches $5,000. The project totals 10. So the club only has to put in $2,500 versus $7,000, which, you know, leaves some dollars that you can use to help other clubs with their projects or to do another project within your own club. And I truly like partnering. It allows other clubs to lend a hand, and you know, we're a group that works together. So, you know, together we can do so much more is kind of my motto. But as we mentioned, district grants can be done either locally or internationally. And we want to show you a couple of projects as examples of how to do both. Now, for a district grant done locally, the Barron County Sunrise Rotary Club took the shark bait last year and made a pitch to build an accessible playground in the city of Barron, Wisconsin. And holy cow, what a show they put on. I really think that they should get the prize for their work collaborating with the city, local businesses, and even the local Kiwanis Club. Can you believe that? And then they also sought input on the type of equipment from the local, and I do mean local, Boys and Girls Clubs. So they got a lot of people involved. But then they involved all their members in helping to you know, do some of the playground work, and also people in the community. So they not only stopped there, but to fund this thing, because they are a small club, they received funding from 7 other Rotary clubs. Obviously, the beauty of partnering in my world. And in our district, those 7 clubs helped that club to make their dream of having a playground where all could play a reality. You know, it really does take a village to make good things happen. And it's also proof in the pudding that small clubs can accomplish big things or make big things happen. So during 2019, the New Richmond Rotary Club decided to get out of their comfort zone and apply for a district grant. They orchestrated a project in Panama, as Ed was telling you about a little earlier, to improve sanitation in a local school that had one marginally, and I do mean marginally, if you saw the picture, you'd cringe at it, working toilet. And what started out as a simple sanitation project just morphed into so much more. Rotarians from New Richmond worked side by side with Rotarians from the Bocas Rotary Club and the local villagers to build a double bathroom for both boys and girls with a hand washing station. And you know what? All of that actually worked. So that was pretty much excitement for them. But they didn't stop there. They also decided, hey, while we're there, let's see if we can do something with school supplies. And you can see in the middle picture, the kids holding up their backpacks that they received from part of this project. So working in the school supplies, they just were delighted with the students, and the teachers were delighted with all the things that were brought forward. But you know what? One of the best outcomes of this whole project was the international friendships that were built. And I think Faribault is starting on that with their global grant with their Cambodia group. So kudos to you too. But it does prove that Rotary grants and Rotary projects can change lives one project at a time. And you know, I'm sure if you talk to the Rotarians from the Barron County Sunrise Rotary Club or the New Richmond Rotary Club, you'll find out that doing these grants did have a positive impact on them as well as the communities they serve. And it just doesn't get any better than that. But now we're going to move on to what I call the magic in how club dollars are matched for a global grant. And there was a change this year. Now, remember earlier we talked about the minimum for a global grant budget is $30,000. Our district will use district designated funds to match club or club contributions 1-to-1 with a limit of 25,000. But in order to get your minimum 30,000, the club puts in, or multiple clubs put in 10,715. Our DDF is matched dollar for dollar up to 25,000, so they get 10,715 there. But then RI, as of July 1, they're making a change and they're matching our district DDF at 0.8-to-1 or 80%, so 8572. And so the project total turns out to be $30,002. So, no matter how you look at it, even though there's a little bit of a reduction over the last couple of years because the need is so much greater for these global grants, that it's still a pretty doggone good return on our dollars. So, you know what else? You know where those funds come from? They come from the generosity of Rotarians contributing to the foundation. So Kyle, back to you, kiddo.
Thanks, Margie. Let's look at where we are currently with our funds available for the 21-22 Rotary year. But before we do that, I want to touch on one thing Margie just talked about with the change in the funding from the Rotary Foundation, where they only match DDF 0.8-to-1 now. That's not a positive thing, but the reason behind it is because over the last several years, the giving to the Rotary Foundation has stayed pretty level. It's grown a little bit, but it's stayed pretty level. Well, the amount of global grant requests that we're getting continues to go up. In fact, since in the last 8 to 10 years, global grants have either tripled or quadrupled in that span of time. So there's more people that want these funds and want to do more with them. And so it's kind of a positive and negative. Yes, we can't get as much for any one grant from the Rotary Foundation as a result of that limited matching, but it's because there's more people wanting to do good in the world with that money, so they're having to spread it around from that perspective. So, so just wanted to touch on that. But where are we this year? So in the 2020-21 Rotary year, we have done 15 district grants. 10 of those have been local, 5 were international in scope, and we provided $73,000 plus of district designated funds for use in funding our district grants this year, which went to match club contributions for those projects. The total expenditure was over $185,000. So we utilize our money along with the club monies to do a lot of good in the world from that perspective. In the 21-22 Rotary year, well, it looks like we'll have up to approximately $90,000 to use as matching funds for clubs. And so that's what we will have available for grants. We covered this a minute ago, but it's worth repeating. The maximum match we will provide is up to $3,000 per club and $12,000 per grant. So it pays to partner with other clubs. Now, in 4 of the last 5 Rotary years, we've had a shortfall where we've had more requests for grant funds than what we've had available. If there is a shortfall, we try to be as fair to all concerned as possible in allocating our DDF, and the grants team uses a matrix for this calculation. What goes into that matrix? Several factors that I'll touch on briefly here, and if you have more questions, reach out to one of us offline and we can help a little bit more. But we look at the club's per capita giving over the past 3 years. That's obviously a positive thing because the more money a club gives to the Rotary Foundation or more money members give, the more money we have available for grants. So we want to reward those clubs that do a good job encouraging their members to give to the Rotary Foundation's annual fund. We also want to encourage clubs to participate with other grants over the past 3 years. This isn't sponsoring a grant. This is helping participate in another club's project as a funding partner. So we can encourage new clubs to come aboard with grants. We look at the number of clubs or number of grants that a club has sponsored in the last 3 years as kind of a negative, because we don't want that club that hasn't brought a grant forward. And frankly, a lot of times, if you look at from a statistical standpoint, clubs that do a lot of grants tend to give more to the Rotary Foundation because their understanding of their foundation is greater. So if a club is coming in for their first grant in 5 or 10 years, we don't want to penalize them adversely. So we're trying to give them a little bit of a leg up there. And lastly, kind of a subjective evaluation of the projects by the grants team. We have our, on June 18th, will be the proposal presentation meeting. And that's done for a couple reasons. Number one, it gives all the other clubs in a district the chance to see what your project may be, so you can start to create more connections in terms of potential funding partners. The other reason we have that, though, is that the grants team is hearing about your projects. That, along with reviewing your proposals, they're able to kind of figure out which grants are going to make the most impact. I think we all know that not every grant is considered equal, and some will have a broader impact on the recipients than others do, and we want to weight that as well. So that's where the subjective evaluation comes into play. So to summarize, what's the best thing you can do to get the most funding possible for your grant? Make sure that your club is giving to the Rotary Foundation as significantly as possible. Make sure you're participating in funding of other grants as a partner with other clubs, and make sure you have an impactful project that is going to help change the lives of a lot of people. Now, and I don't know who's going to be able to help me with this because, oh, it's me today. Neat. Cool. We're going to show our first poll question. And the first question, you should have it up there. Where can district grants be completed? Within our district only in a different country, or anywhere in the world? And take a minute to answer this. And as you answer, I will tell you that my surprise there was because in the first 2 sessions, regardless of what Ed and I tried, I could not show this screen. Only Ed could show the screen, and we couldn't figure it out. But looks like everybody has voted here, or at least everybody except for me, so that's good. And we're going to end the polling, and we will share the results. And it looks like 29 of you, or 85%, got the answer right. Anywhere in the world, a district grant can be done either in our district or in a different country. There is no limits from the geography on that side of things. A global grant can only be done internationally. So that's the difference there from the district versus a global grant. Now we're going to move on, and I'm glad that, well, Margie's she's back, but it doesn't matter yet because this is my screen. Margie's going to take us through the grant creation process in a minute, but first we want to talk to you about the requirements to get your club qualified for a grant. Number one, Rotary Foundation guidelines say that a member of a club that is sponsoring a grant must attend the grants management seminar. So by all of you being here today, you are making your club eligible to do that. Number two, a club must be in good standing. What does that mean? It means a couple things. Number one, that all of your dues are current. That means your Rotary International and district dues are current for your club. So make sure you're not delinquent on that. If you're not sure if you are or aren't, Kathy Hewitt's the first person to check out on that one. And the other part of good standing would mean that all grant progress or final reports are up to date. If you've done any other projects in the last year or two, you don't need to necessarily be done with the project, but your reporting has to be up to date. That's especially important in our COVID-affected world, that some clubs have had to postpone a grant from the last couple of years because they just can't do it right now. That's okay. You don't have to be done with the project in order to sponsor another grant, but you do need to have a progress report filed with us that at least tells us, we know, we're working on it, here's what's happening, so we're up to date with that. Lastly, the Rotary Foundation's Memorandum of Understanding and District Addendum, those are documents that were emailed to you in the run-up to this, and Kathy will send out an email afterwards with those as well, but those need to be signed. And please note on those, it's your president and president-elect as of July 1st, 2021, okay? So it's not this year's president, the 2020-21 president, but it's the 21-22 president and 21-22 president-elect who will be the president for the 22-23 year. Before we go on, I want to go back to one thing on a club member must attend the grants management seminar. That's for a district grant. If your club is thinking about doing a global grant, not only does the member need to attend one of these grants management seminars, but has to attend one of our global grant workshops where we'll talk more specifically about global grants as well. And those are on Thursday and next Tuesday, I believe. The 1st and the 6th is when those are. So if you haven't registered for those yet, Kathy will send out the links so you have that to register. But if you want to do a global grant, you need to do both of those. With that, I think Charlie Cogan just asked a question. If an overseas Rotary Club wants to help Rotarians in the United States with something, can a project be carried out here? Yes. It's just different and I would assume Charlie was talking about a global grant. All a global grant needs is a host club, which is where the project is being done, and an international club, an international sponsor, which is the club somewhere else. So typically when we do grants, our clubs, we are that international partner, and the host club is the club on the ground. But that can be flipped and done more something here. So that's we can find that, especially as Charlie's example with hurricanes. Yes, after Hurricane Katrina, there were a lot of global grants that happened here in the United States. So Margie, with that, I'm going to let you take over how to create a district grant. Go for it, Margie.
And before I get into that, just to piggyback, we had a recent grant that 5580 is split between Canada and the United States. And they authored a grant in the United States for Indigenous women and children. And so that's an example of that thing happening where the Canadian club started the grant, but the actual work was done here in the United States. So yes, it can happen. Okay, now we're going to take you on a whirlwind trip through creating a grant. And the focus of this seminar is on district grants, but really the basics are pertinent for global grants as well. So as in, number one, coming up with a great idea. The project supports the goals and missions of RI and the Rotary Foundation, and it also promotes Rotary awareness. So good grants engage members, support meaningful service projects, and provide a meaningful impact long after the grant is done. Brainstorm with your club. Make this a fun event. You never know where a great idea may come from. And projects can be, this is district grant, they can be local or international in scope. But one important thing is to respect the wishes of the receiving community. You have to ask yourself, is the project something the community wants and needs? Does it strive to understand and appreciate the culture and the community traditions? It should do that. Rotarians should be directly involved, and that doesn't mean just with fundraising. The project can't be one, this is super important, you guys. It cannot be one that has already been started. It must be new. And the grant application that Kyle might be able to pull up on the screen has a whole list of eligible and ineligible projects. Now, it's not conclusive, but it does have you gives you a great idea of what you can and cannot do. Well, you're going to get the application, and you can look. It's like one of the very first pages, which will have both eligible and ineligible.
I'm getting there, Margie. I'm getting there. Hold on.
That's all right.
Yeah. Okay, it is.
There. Okay, keep going. There you go. Okay. And one of the things we have questions on is on a district grant, you can do some new construction and refurbishing, where a global grant, you absolutely cannot do that. So it does give you some, pretty good ideas of what you can and can't do. But, if you have questions, please contact your mentor or me, and we can walk through some of the ideas, okay? Somebody must be having their phone on, or they're not.
Yeah, that was me. My bad. That was me.
Kyle,
Sorry.
geez, you're interrupting the show. Okay, so now we got the great idea. Now you want to build a team. And on a district grant, establishing a team of 3 is a great idea. And these folks are the project champions. First, you'd have a lead or primary contact, and they could equate to what we could call a project manager or the emotional lead. Then a finance person is also a good person to have on that team. They can be in charge of the budget, fund management, stewardship guidelines, and more importantly, proper record keeping, which is critical to the project. And promotion. We can't put a barrel over what we're doing. This contact lets everyone know what's happening. They can use print media, they can use social media, anything available to toot their horn about the project. They also can document the project, provide a narrative about what's going on, take pictures. Pictures tell 1,000 words, so feel free to go crazy with that. And also that gives them an idea on this promotion to report the project impact, because that's really an important thing of how we're using our money. And communication, making sure everybody on the team knows their roles and is on board with the project. And these 3 people must be from your club. So if you're the author, if you're White Bear Lake, the 3 people have to be White Bear Lake Rotarians for that, those 3 folks on the contact list. Then request a mentor, and you can do that today. Your mentor will assist you with defining your concepts of acceptability, Okay, sometimes you get a great idea, but it's not really going to fit. And putting that idea into the grant application. And your mentor is there to walk side by side is to help you navigate the ins and outs of the project all the way through to the final report. So we have several on the call today, and they are huge assets to, I think, our grant process. Not all districts have grant mentors, by the way. And the next one would be to build a plan and set the budget. Describe your project. And this is what just drives me crazy. I'm going to put a little personal thing in here. In the very first paragraph, tell me exactly what do you want the funds for? What are you going to use to spend it on? Don't go on for 2 or 3 pages and then hidden in there, there's one line that says, well, we'd really like money for this. Put it up front so your reader knows exactly what you're asking for. Excuse me. So at any rate, putting that into the first sentence or the first paragraph is my idea of putting together a good grant. Also, be clear. Stick to the definition of the project and how it will benefit the intended beneficiaries. And really try to stay away from adding tons and tons of language that really isn't pertinent to the project. Use compelling language. One thing that's very important in this is to state how will the Rotarians be involved. For example, okay, the Rotarians will help clear the site for the playground. Or say you're doing an international project and you're on Zoom with them. You interview the organization to explore their needs, and based on those needs, that's how you'd figure out what your grant is going to be. So those are ideas of how Rotarians can be involved when, say we all can't go to Kenya to, help with the project, but we can contact people there and work with them, to make it work a little bit more personally. Figure out a reasonable timeline. Like I talked about before, we usually would like a district grant to be completed within 12 months, but we certainly realize the COVID challenges that have hit many of the grants, and we obviously work with each and every one of them. So another thing would be on this budget, get estimates for the components of your grant. Don't guess. The budget should be a reasonable snapshot of what your actual expenses will be. Now, indicate who will own and maintain the equipment and operate the items and secure the things that are purchased with the grant funds. And just bear in mind, a Rotary Club may never, ever, ever own the equipment, okay? So, and I also would be remiss if I didn't discuss OFAC, OFAC, which stands for Office of Foreign Asset Control. And this is a requirement of the US government. They don't want funds being diverted to terrorists. So if your country is your grant is in a foreign country, we would check the list because it changes all the time to see if the country you'll be working with is on the list. But by all means, it does not mean your project can't be done. You just have to complete the OFAC review checklist, and it will point out that your money is not going to support terrorists, but to support a Rotary project. But this is another spot where the mentor can come in and lend a hand, and they can help you over this hurdle. So don't worry about that piece at all. And then submit your proposal. Now the deadline this year is June 4th, 2021. So it's June 4th. You only need to complete the first 4 sections of the grant application. So, there's 11 sections all told, but there's the first 4 that are completed for this proposal part. Email it to your mentor. They'll work with you. Actually, email it before the 4th of June so you can, figure out any issues that need to be dealt with. But the mentor will, work with you to tweak it, make it a little clearer, or clear up some things that they know are not going to fly. And the mentor then shares it with the grants team. And if there's questions on your proposal, you'll have time to get them answered between June 4th and Friday, June 18th, which is the actual presentation day. So the next thing, the proposal is approved by the grants team. We're moving ahead, and the DDF, district designated funds, are allocated. Then you would present your proposal at that special meeting that I talked about on June 18th in the afternoon, and we're going to have it virtual via Zoom. And the grants team, if the funding, there's more requests for funds than we have available, we'll use the 3 objective criteria that Kyle went over and the 1 subjective criterion that the grant mentors get to chime in on. And we'll use that to allocate the available DDF from our block grant. But you'll receive an email shortly after that meeting, and I'll send it to you to let you know what your club's award will be. But capital letters, bold print, don't start your project, because there's a few more things that the district must jump through in order to get this ball rolling. Once the block grant is completed, I'll put everybody's idea into it along with the funding piece. I submit it to RI, and then they'll go over it. And here's where the clarity comes in. Because if we're crystal clear on something we want to do, RI is probably not going to ask questions about it, and our grant will be approved much quicker. So once it's approved, I will send you an email pronto that you now have the green light that you can start your project, but that probably is not going to be until mid-July, okay? So don't start the project until you get that green light that RI has approved our block grant, and we're good to go. And of course, you know, once they approve it, they put the money into our bank, so we have the money to give to you guys. So as soon as we get the approval, you know, you're going to find out about that. Now, establish funding. It's not too early to work on your funding, especially if you need partners. You know, reach out to other clubs for help. And sometimes, you know, just with being in this group here, you can say, oh yeah, wait a minute, I know so-and-so, maybe they could help me with my project. And, you know, that ask is really important. And there's clubs that look for partnering because they think it's important to be able to share with other clubs in their grants, because, you know, we're all doing good in the world, and so what if it's not our project that we're the author of? So sometimes a club that you're going to ask to partner with is going to ask you to give a little dog and pony show. So be ready to present at one of their meetings and tell your story. And tell your story everywhere, because you never know where funding may come from. So the next thing is, now you got that all squared away, you submit your application. And just to clear up something that is kind of a goofy deal, but in July, when I say, hey, we got the approval, you can start your project, you can start your project without submitting your application, but you will not get your money from us until you submit the application, okay? But you can start it. But completing the application, like I said, there's 11 sections, and the first 4 are already completed, so you just would finish the rest of them. It's not that you'll be able to do it, really, especially with your mentor. So don't get excited and think, oh, it's way too much work, because it's really not. And signatures are involved, and due to all the COVID and Zoom and what have you, we are allowing signatures on the project contacts, the 3 project contacts, your president, and that would be the one who's starting July of 2021, and the person responsible for the final report. We're accepting electronic signatures, so you don't have to actually physically see that person and have them sign it and go through that rigmarole. So another thing that you want to do with your application package is get a letter from your beneficiary or your cooperating organization that specifically states its responsibilities and it's how it's going to interact with you, the Rotarians. So you also would include commitment letters or copies of checks from additional contributing clubs noting their contribution. But your mentor can help you gather and put together a complete package for submission as your application. Now you're implementing your project. You know, like I said, in mid-July, you'll get the okay. So communicate with your club members, partners, and your mentor how things are progressing, and document with photos as things move along, because like I think photos tell a million stories. So maintain records. You know, these project funds, they're not yours to use frivolously. They're to be used for exactly what you said, the project funds. So getting and keeping receipts and keeping good records is really, really important. And another thing you want to keep on the records is copies of invoices, copies of checks from the other people that are donating to your project. And what else? Let's see, the checks that your club would write to actually pay for the project, because you have to prove that your club actually paid for this stuff. It didn't come from space somewhere. So now that you've got your project all done and everything's going good, now is the time where you submit, if it isn't completed within 6 months, you submit a progress report. And if it is, you'd submit a final report. And the progress or final report, like I said, is due in 6-month intervals after the approval of the grant. So say we approve the grant at our July meeting, it would be due 6 months after that, which would be what, April? Yes, July, let's see, July to August, September, October, November, December, January, actually be due in January. But I would let you know the exact date of when it's approved, and your mentor will be, reminding you that a grant report is due. Now, as you're implementing your project, be thinking of how you'll document your story, because we're going to ask some questions. And one of them would be, what's the expected long-term community impacts of the project? With more specific numbers. We want to be able to report back to RI, basically how many people are really being impacted with our projects. How did the project provide community members with specific skills or knowledge that will allow them to help themselves? How many Rotarians worked on the project? What did they do? And like I said, it has to be more than fundraising. And another thing that RI is kind of asking us to look at is how many volunteer hours it took to complete the project. And it's amazing once you start tallying up how quickly that number rises. And if you equate those dollars for volunteer hours into if you had to pay somebody, boy, the value of the project just goes up and up and up. So include photos of the projects with your reports. We would love to be able to feature them at any future foundation events. And wouldn't it be great if we could be in person actually, and other communications that we have. So, and then we talked about receipts and proof that the club paid for the items listed. So that about wraps it up from beginning to end. And Kyle, back to you.
Thanks, Margie. Our second poll question, and I'll see if we can get this one to actually work as well. I think we can. What needs to be done to qualify a club for a district grant? Would it be club member must attend a grants management seminar? Club must be in good standing? Club must submit signed MOU and district addendum? Or D, all of the above? And it looks like we're almost good.
I don't know if it's just me, but I'm getting question 2 in progress and it doesn't let me select anything. What's the deal with that?
I think it's because you're a host for the meeting. It doesn't let hosts vote. So we're going to end polling and share the results, and everybody gets an A for that question there. So good job. Yes, it's D, all of the above. Now, Margie just went through a lot of information, and I'm sure your head may be spinning a little bit, but here's the best news if that's the case. You're not alone when developing your grant, and we have a lot of tools and resources at your disposal to help you. As Margie mentioned, when you first bring an idea forward, you'll be assigned a mentor. Our members are part of our grants team, and they'll work alongside you during the grant to help make sure your application is put together correctly and that the full grant process goes smoothly. And we have several of our mentors on the call here today. Jim Hunt from the White Bear Lake Club, Dale Quigley, who is also the district governor nominee from the St. Paul Club, Guy Solinsky from the Prior Lake Club, Brad Kirscher from the Roseville Club, and Glenn Bowers from Arden Hills Shoreview. So we have probably 10 or 11 mentors, and they're all willing to help, and they will walk with you along the way during the project. Speaking of Jim Hunt, he is also our district international service chair. and he's able to help you if your grant is being done internationally. This can include helping research any special requirements in a country, identifying a club or district on the ground that may be able to assist, or providing different tips and tricks based on a particular area with any experience that we have. It may be hard to believe, but in all areas of the world, it is not as easy to do grants as we might think it is. And to get through some of those hoops or know how to deal with certain personality types or Rotarians in some countries to be able to get from point A to B to C takes a little help sometimes, and Jim can help with those. Also, we have our quick reference guide that we sent a copy of in the email prior to the meeting as well, and we'll send again. This provides a lot of good information about the grant process. I'd recommend reviewing it before you get started with the process so you know what to expect. And I mentioned your mentor and the grants team a minute ago, but it's more than just having a mentor. You have the whole team of mentors working together behind the scenes to review your grants and make sure that they are put together as well as possible. And you may get help from several mentors along the way. And there's plenty of other online resources out there at our district site and at rotary.org that you can utilize as well. So now we'll go to our next poll question, and I'm gonna, let's see here, stop share results. Did I have that up there the whole time? All right, question number 3, as you can see on the screen, what's the deadline for submitting proposals? Is it May 4th, June 4th, or July 4th? All right, just waiting on a couple more people to answer. And looks like we're about good, yep. And the answer would be June 4th. We have one Star Wars fan, to steal Ed's joke from the other day. Yeah, June 4th is the day that you want to make sure your proposals are in by. If you want to aim towards May 4th, that's okay. That's pre-deadline, so you're still okay there. Don't wait until July 4th, though, because that's going to create an issue from that perspective.
And
yes,
we
as Brad
would
says,
love to get it early as possible so we can work out any bugs. So yeah, go for it, team. Go for it.
Absolutely. Margie, why don't you talk about document retention?
Well, I got on mute. Okay, I forgot I got another part here. Okay, document retention. Why? Why is that important? Well, we are fiduciaries of the funds received, and it's our job to make sure that those dollars are spent appropriately. Now, what would that include? That would include receipts, invoices, letters from vendors or beneficiaries, the grant application itself, copies of progress or final reports, and copies that proof that your club actually paid for the items in the project. Reports. Well, this is kind of my nemesis here. The report recaps what you did, what the cost was, who benefited, talks about the impact provided, and also proof that the funds were spent appropriately. And, this timely report, RI is requiring us to have reports of what the dollars are spent for. So in other words, we're under the gun too. If you don't report to us and we're audited, we can be in trouble. So believe me, you will get bugged if the reports aren't in, and you'll get bugged again and again and again. But so try to cooperate and know that at the end of the thing, you've got a report or a progress report if you're, not all the way through with your project. That is not problematic at all. So now let's talk a little bit about principles of successful grants. All right, needs assessment. Even though a district grant does not need a formal needs assessment, you still want to make sure that your project met a need. And that's where talking to the organizations, don't just think, well, I think they need this. Maybe that organization would prefer something a little bit different. So be sure to consider that. Number 2, it can't impress you enough on organization for the implementation of your plan. If you're organized, things are going to go so much better. That it's just an important piece of anything that we do in our lives, if you will. And another thing that is real important is that frequent partner communication and teamwork. If you're the leader and you don't tell anybody what they're supposed to do or what you've done or what's happening, you know, how can you possibly expect a project to go smoothly? So that communication piece, it, like in all walks of life, is critical in the grant process as well. And sustainable. Now, global grants must document sustainability. And we'd like our district grants to be sustainable too, but we also know that there's some really great grants. Like this summer, people were providing help with food shelves and things like that. Obviously, those are kind of one and done, but they did provide a real need of the community at that time. So those are okay too. But you know, if you're doing something like, for instance, the latrine in the Panama, you know, the teamwork to, or the group to, you know, keep contact with them. How's it going? Is everything, is rainwater coming off good? You know, is everything working right? Just to make sure that you really want that project to be working for them long term, not just a couple months and then we're gone and we forget about it. And proper stewardship, you know, the Rotary name adds integrity to any project, and we sure don't want to sully that reputation. So, you know, that stewardship is absolutely a real important pillar of this. And then celebrate. You know, it's always fun to be talking about what we did, what, you know, what was the impact. And, you know, I think everybody likes to hear a good story of something good that was done in the community. And if you can talk to your members about, hey, we did this, you know, celebrate any way possible. I don't think in the world we celebrate enough. We're too busy worrying about other things, but that celebration piece in my world is really, really important. So that's all I've got on successful principles of successful grants there, Kyle.
Thanks, Margie. Now, as we get towards the end here, we'll just do our attendance check number 2. There we go. Please enter your name and club into the chat box again. So we know you're here. Okay, and while you all do that, just as we close, I want to touch on a couple of the key takeaways from this whole seminar here. The importance of giving. Obviously, the more we give to the Rotary Foundation, the more we can do with that money over time. So please, please, please continue to be those champions for the Rotary Foundation in your club. And it just doesn't mean nagging and encouraging people to give, but point out, hey, this is what we did in this project, and here are the people that we impacted, and we couldn't have done that without your gifts to the Rotary Foundation. So thank you and keep it up. That type of championing and using your grant as an example will bring it to life better for members than just talking about giving. In fact, we've found that it's very effective. It's the telling the story that's going to make people want to part with their time, money, and talents. And so tell the story of your project. Obviously, getting qualified is important. The Rotary Foundation requires that you're qualified. So now you are that much closer to being qualified, or along with that memorandum of understanding and district addendum, and making sure your club is up to date and current on all the reports and stuff. And the key takeaways that we've talked about, just, let's just make sure that you have that mentor involved, and that I think we've talked to you about some of the important aspects of the projects, making sure it's a need that can be met, and really going through it in a good planning process. Margie, any other things you want to talk about in the key takeaways?
Well, not really a takeaway, but a question that we often get is, okay, it's a club and they've got their president for starting July 1, 2021, but they don't have a president-elect yet. If that's the case, have another person who's a long-term member, say the secretary or the treasurer or some other key person in the club sign, for the quote president-elect. But as soon as you do get a president-elect, let us know. So anyway, that's just a question we often get, and hopefully that's not the case in any of your clubs, but sometimes it is.
I'm going to just go through here. The next slide says questions, and there's our information, which I'll put in the chat again. Stop that share. And Margie, we did have a couple questions that came in that we'll touch on first before opening it up for more. But on a district grant, will we match contributions from clubs outside of our district with our DDF?
Yes, we will. And last year, the Rotary Club, with the help of St. Paul as their sponsor, they put together a grant to provide, I don't know, 50 or 75 of these little tablets to seniors that were lower income and they were secluded because of COVID in, assisted living or whatever. Well, District 5950 ponied up with some dollars and we matched it. So
it still has the same up to 3,000 per club. Right. And the 12,000 per grant, but yes, we would do that. Margie, Natalie Ginter from Faribault asked, why would a club do a district grant internationally versus a global grant? What are the positives and negatives, I guess, or the benefits of either way of going about things there?
Well, the main reason would be there's no Rotary Club that's accessible to the project site. And to me, that's the main reason. Or they can't, find a club that is able to support the project in the area, which sometimes it's not that easy, right, Kyle?
True story.
Yeah, true story. So that could be a reason, or maybe, the grant isn't that much money. It used to be, that you had to ask for at least a minimum of 15,000 from the RI funds, but that's no longer the case. It's just that the project has to be a minimum budget of 30,000. So, to me, the only main reason would be the lack of a Rotary Club on the ground to help you.
Yeah, and that district grant. Yeah, and I would add to it, the district grant just doesn't quite have the same.
Yeah,
it's not quite the same requirements, so it can move a little bit more quickly, and it's just a little bit more flexible. Where a global grant is going to be larger, too. Yeah, like Patty said, district grants are much easier to orchestrate, and as Lauren says, a global grant has to be at least $30,000. So you're getting more match, but you have more hoops to jump through and everything. Any other questions from anybody today before we finish?
Yeah, Patty.
Patty, go for it.
I just have a question about the memorandum. Is it the page in the grant that you provided, the primary context, or is it a separate form?
That's a separate form that needs to be signed by the 21-22 president and president-elect of the club. That is a separate form that was sent out with the reminder, and it will be sent out as a follow-up here as well. But yeah, the memorandum of understanding, it's the Rotary Foundation memorandum of understanding, and then we have our district's addendum. They both need to be signed.
Okay.
And could I know that some clubs in the past, they thought they were saving space by emailing only one page with signatures. The memorandum of understanding is a 3-page document. Email all 3 pages, and the addendum is 1 page. So, we'd like in other words, 4 pages. So don't, just chop it off and send the signature page, because then we don't know who the heck we're dealing with.
Margie, since we're dealing in our COVID times where clubs aren't meeting on a regular basis, would we accept an e-signature on the memorandum of understanding?
Yes, we would. Absolutely.
Okay.
So
if anybody,
easier too.
Yeah, and if anybody wants, they can reach out to Kathy Hewitt or myself to coordinate an actual DocuSign e-signature, or they can, do it that way. Where that one needs to be looked at a little bit more. Just typing your name in italics is probably not the way we want to go about things, but reach out to Kathy and I, and we can help you through that. Natalie, another question, is the same MOU and addendum used for the global grant also? Yes. Yeah, that is the same there. Lauren, is there a process or location for Rotary members to be able to submit suggestion changes to the grant process? Margie, why don't you
absolutely.
take that
Sure.
one?
Send me. We're always looking for change, great ideas. If you want to join the team, absolutely come on board, because fresh new ideas are the name of the game. And, you know, we try to manipulate and move with how things are working in the real world. And for RI, no, Lauren, that would not be the case. I don't think RI is taking the suggestions quite as literally as us, but on our district grant process, yeah, if you've got, you know, some great ideas, absolutely talk about it. If it's an area that, you know, this just doesn't make sense, you know, maybe it doesn't, and we can, you know, because 10 years ago, that was the way to do it. Life is about change, and we've made several changes this year, and we will continue to evolve. So yeah, feel free to suggest like crazy, but I don't think RI is gonna listen very much. So
Well, I would, and yes and no to that. Obviously, the Rotary Foundation, especially with global grants, has more stringent requirements. But part of the reason for that is because it's an international organization with people sponsoring grants from all over the world, and things that may seem very redundant and unnecessary for us isn't the same in other parts of the world where, you know, they wouldn't, it's maybe a cash-based or barter-based society where there's not the same level of record keeping and everything like that. So the foundation needs to be able to keep things as strong as possible there to make sure we're utilizing the funds appropriately. And they continue to make changes to the grants process. Every year, there are updates to the grants process and trying to make things easier. So certainly if you do have any recommendations, give them to Margie or give them to me or Ed, and we can pass them along. It's just obviously where they're looking at things on an international level, the speed and ability to make those changes isn't quite the same as it might be at our district level. And certainly over the last couple of years, we've changed quite a bit in terms of how we operate with the grants process on district grants and trying to make it easier for people as well. So yes, suggestions are welcome, and we will try our best to keep pushing that forward and keep going from that perspective. And Joanne just said having members who have attended a grants management seminar previously could watch an abbreviated, and that's frankly that's what this is. You know, the grants management seminar used to be, before last year, was a 3 or 3.5 hour in-person event. Last year, before COVID hit, we were still going to do it in person, but we were going to add a hour and a half long refresher course to hit the high notes for people that had attended them in the past. When COVID hit, we scrapped the grants management seminar, and basically this is that refresher hitting the high notes of everything. And I'm not sure how much more we can abbreviate without really doing a disservice of those things we need to focus on, but we're still trying to create as much value as possible. And I think an hour and 15 minutes on Zoom versus 3.5 hours in person plus the drive both ways is a whole lot more valuable of everybody's time than it could be otherwise there. Any other questions from anybody? Margie?
I would just like to make a comment that I did not mean to sound that the RA people were hard to work with. That is not the case. They want, like mostly it's global grants, but they want those to go through. And you know, I think, you know, they're offering suggestions, and I really think they do help to, make it work. But, we have to realize that their world is scrutiny and making sure that things are done appropriately. But they couldn't be better to work with. I mean, I've had great response with people when I've asked them questions. So it's not that level. Okay.
And
That's
that's
all.
why too, that we've had 12 straight years of the highest rating possible from Charity Navigator, because we're doing things in an effective way and taking good care of our donors' money. That's what it comes down to there. So people want to continue to give. So any other questions from anybody?
I'm certainly hoping to hear from some of you with grants, district grants. Just be sure to email me, or, if you don't know my email, go talk to Kyle or Ed or whatever. But yeah, let's get the ball growing and get our money out in the world working to, help lots of different people.
Mhm.
And creativity is the name of the game on those district grants. So.
Absolutely. And Margie, I'm going to mention one more thing here before we're done. You mentioned it earlier, the Shark Tank that we did last year, which was for any clubs that hadn't sponsored a grant in the prior 3 years could bring a grant forward as part of this Shark Tank program. And then clubs that had sponsored a grant in the previous 3 years could act as sharks and commit funds to those projects. It was a really nice way to be able to not only give practice to those clubs in terms of presenting or pitching their project, but it gave them a really nice way to create relationships right off the bat for funding. And I know Monica's on the call from Barron County Sunrise. They were one of the clubs in the Shark Tank, and so was Lauren with their the Rochester Club's telemedicine grant in Rochester in Uganda. and Mike's here too. Yeah, all three from Austin. Those were the three clubs that put forth projects, and they had 4 clubs that also stepped up as sharks that committed money to those projects, so they didn't have to work as hard to do it otherwise there when they had to go pound on doors to the same rate. So for any of you that haven't had a project in the last 3 years, or are wondering if you haven't, let us know, because I think the deadline is April 8th. And so far, Margie, one club has come forward with a project so far? Or?
Oh, I knew you were going to put me on the spot there. Well, actually, Faribault, I think, wants to commit, and Fridley of Columbia Heights.
Okay, that's right. Yep.
And I'm seeing Elk River on here. Casey, I hope you guys got a project going this year.
And David Pope from Janesville. David Pope from Janesville is here too, and hopefully that's the case as well.
They participated in the Ethiopia toilet project, right, David? Yeah.
Well, they participated. They didn't sponsor, though. They're good.
The name of the game is, if you don't step up and do something, you're just going to be sorry, because really it's just such a benefit for everybody involved, and your club. I mean, your club can be so proud of the things that you're doing. Yeah. So, all right, Kyle, are we ready to close?
Yeah, I will take us home. Thanks for attending today's grants management seminar. Congratulations. This step is down now, that you're that much more qualified to do a grant. We hope that you took away information that will help you in the grant process, and that you are looking forward to creating positive peace in the world through your grant. Remember your homework. Make sure that you complete your foundation memorandum of understanding and district addendum, and that will help make sure you're qualified for a grant. So with that, enjoy your evening and have a good rest of the week, and go